Good morning, everybody. Is it working? Yeah? Good. For those who don't know me, my name is Byron van Heusen. I'm acting as chair of the Department of Arts, Culture and Media Studies. It's a pleasure for me to welcome you all to this workshop, and particularly welcome to Professor Jason Mittell from Middleburg College in Vermont in the United States. And he is here to give today this workshop on complex television and participatory technologies. Some of you, probably most of you, will have heard him yesterday when he gave the lecture on complex television in the Studium Generale series. And this lecture was a big success, at least from the point of numbers. A lot of students. I think the auditorium, the Geertsenzaal, was almost full, so more than 200 people. And also the response in the Q&A afterwards was quite lively. So the topic is apparently, and we could have predicted that, but we didn't expect it to be that big. The topic is hot. We are very happy to have Professor Jason Mittell here. In general, it is, I think, a very good thing to have guest lecturers now and then coming in, because they allow you to broaden the scope of what you are doing, but they also function as a kind of reference point to find out where you are standing as a department. It's a kind of touchstone for the department, also not only for the teachers and the staff, but also I think for the students. Okay, so we are doing this here in Groningen, and that's what they are doing abroad, and does it fit? How do they, are there different perspectives, different ideologies, eventually, etc. And then, of course, there's another appealing thing to having a guest lecturer, and this is, I don't know whether this is specific for the digital age, but like with going to concerts, I mean, you can read from somebody, you can even look at him on the internet, but there is nothing that matches the real thing. And in one way or another, I have the impression that this is becoming stronger and stronger, so it's great to have you here live. Well, if somebody might have thought that complexity in television or wherever else is a European thing, it's very clear that you're wrong. Complexity is not just a European thing, it's a global thing by now. And we heard yesterday about how complexity increased in American television. And I think the lecture raised a number of interesting questions, issues. Some of them were touched upon in the question and answer section afterwards, some were definitely not. And that's why we are particularly happy that we can go on with the discussion today in this workshop, go into some of the things more in depth. And hopefully, by doing so, contribute on the one hand to your new book, and on the other hand to our collective intelligence. The structure of the workshop will be in two parts. First, Professor Jason Mittell will talk about forensic fandom, and this idea that the fans are participating and more interactively related to the television. There will be first a presentation, I think, then discussion, then we will have a little break, and then there will be a second part of the workshop, which will be in which we will concentrate on authorship. I think there's a lot to do. I'm looking forward to it. Jason Mittell, please, the floor is yours.
Okay. Well, thank you, and please let me know if either sound is, if I'm not being loud enough, or if you can't see what's on the screen. Yesterday was a really enjoyable talk for me, and I quite looking forward to this morning. I want to give you a sort of taste of two chapters of my book that are forthcoming. So yesterday in the lecture, I presented the kind of overview, the introduction, and then I shared with you as an advanced reading the sort of text version of that, which turns out was unfortunately a sort of messed up file, so there were a few gaps. But it will go live online in the revised version by the end of this month. And again, that's on the bottom link, the tiny URL link. And I do welcome people to go there and provide feedback on the chapters as they roll out serially. And I think it's one of the really nice things about traveling and giving talks about a project that you're working on is that you do get that feedback. And as you said, that live interaction is hard to replace, but we're if not approximating it, at least mimicking it pretty well online now with the ability to have work go out pre-publication and have it be the sort of fodder for conversation. So I do welcome and encourage people to do that. So today, like I said, I'm going to be talking about 2 chapters in the book, and let me give you a really brief visual of what the book is. So the intro, the complexity in context chapter that I shared and presented yesterday is the starting point. And then I'm structuring the book in a way that I'm inviting people to read the subsequent chapters after that one in any order that they'd like. It's not a linear narrative. It's more episodic. It's so each chapter has a standalone, I don't want to say integrity, but at least form. And the goal is that you can sort of choose what most interests you. Today I'm choosing for you as selecting that which I have prepared and ready to go. And I'm going to be looking at 2 chapters. The authorship, which is alphabetically the first one. It will be arranged alphabetically in the final print book, just to highlight the arbitrariness of that order. But today I'm flipping it, so I'll start with this chapter called Orienting Paratexts. And again, these will all be online soon enough. Okay, so in this presentation, I want to consider how viewers make sense of these complex serial narratives that I talked about yesterday through the practices of orientation and mapping, primarily through creating orienting paratexts. So by paratexts, I'm drawing upon a sort of long tradition of theory that highlights the way in which that a core narrative text, or non-narrative text as the case might be, is surrounded by other elements. And those elements can be anything from the DVD cover to the promotional poster to critical reviews and all sorts of other materials that surround the text and help us encounter it. And for the purposes of today, I'm mostly interested in this question of how do these complex serials that can be very disorienting, how do fans engage with them in a way that they're using some of the tools of mostly digital technologies to help make sense of this world? And to do so, I have a sort of, my narratological impulse is always to taxonomize and provide categories. So I'll really be mapping out a number of categories of orienting paratexts, trying to provide a list of the different strategies that are used, and then reflect a little bit about their significance toward the end. Okay, so briefly, just to start with a definition, and this was in the chapter that I shared, a definition of what we mean by narrative when we're talking about a serial television show. And so this is the definition I'm using. A television serial creates a sustained narrative universe populated by a consistent set of characters who experience a chain of events over time. And then if we look at this definition, there are 4 facets that come to the fore that can be oriented: time, characters, events, and space. So these categories will be the roadmap for my presentation. So I'm going to start with time. And as I said yesterday, I think time is the crucial variable in understanding seriality and arguably television itself, because seriality is defined as manipulating time as a storytelling variable. So if we go back to these 3 categories of time frames that I presented yesterday, we can see each one of them has their own associated orienting paratexts. So screen time again, the time it takes to watch something has different tools that people use to make sense of the television schedule. So this can be from the industry itself. So here is a picture of an on-screen electronic program guide that you can call up on cable or DVR in order to see what is on at a given time. And these things are so ubiquitous that they become invisible to us. But for those of us who grew up in an era before electronic program guides, in the US at least, the most popular magazine, sort of circulating magazine was TV Guide up until the 1990s. And it was a magazine whose pretty much sole purpose was to provide you a grid of when things are on. Now, this is a hugely essential orienting paratext. And today, we see it digitally, either provided by the industry or created by fans. So that is a list of on a website called epguides.com, a very sort of old school website where they just list every episode of every show that they can and provide sort of brief information about each. But this is a huge issue. I mean, knowing when to watch something is key for seriality, because if one of the ways in which we make sense of these shows is to understand them cumulatively and sequentially, we need to know when things are on, what episode is on, is this a rerun, is this the start of the new season? And understanding that is a job for these types of orienting paratexts. So we can look at schedule as orientation, as a key element. Now, screen time may be fairly rigid and constrained and grid-like, but plot time or discourse time is a lot more variable. So understanding how the nested flashbacks, replays, flash forwards, and other the atemporal shifts, as I talked about yesterday, play out requires some information. So fans create summaries. A plot summary is effectively a orienting paratext of plot time, of discourse time. This is what happened. This is what laid out in the episode. Recapped. So here's a recap from the How I Met Your Mother wiki that not only tries to explain what happened in this episode, but contextualize it through this long serial. So if you know How I Met Your Mother, the character of the slutty pumpkin is a sort of important figure in the sort of complex mythology of the show. And we can see her sort of play out in different times. This is about the episode called Slutty Pumpkin, which becomes sort of the nexus point for this character. But again, there are multiple time frames within these episodes. Certainly, as I referenced yesterday, arguably the most complex chronology in American television has been lost. So we can see here's an example of a lost timeline that fans created to try to chart what's happening. Obviously, you can't read anything on that, but you can get a sense by looking at the picture here of its complexity. Here's another example, which is Battlestar Galactica, where fans use chronology as orientation, attempting to create a chronological map of what has happened, how the story is being told. And then plot time refers to the sequence and selection of the narrative material as presented to the audience, whereas story time is the temporal experiences within the story world itself, felt by the characters. As I said yesterday, usually story time is felt very sequentially, but if we think about the way in which audiences make sense of story time, there's a need to understand, so how long is this taking? So, if we think of a show like